It was one hell of a party. The last thing Ben really remembered about it was Jack and Carl passed out on the couch and Jennifer taking photos on her cell phone. They looked damn funny. Jack's head fell into Carl's lap, his mouth wide open. Of course they had to take a photo. It would be a great laugh at future parties. Jennifer was a regular visitor to the home of Ben and his wife Sheila, even when Sheila was sometimes out of town for too long. Just like Jack and Carl, and Carrie, Carl's little wife. Carrie had also long since given up trying to have fun. She was only 5 feet tall and weighed maybe 100 pounds, so it didn't take much for her to pass out. As almost always, she ended up huddled in a bed in one of their 2 guest rooms. Both Sheila and Jennifer were quite tall, about 6 feet. They were so close in size that they often exchanged clothes, and Ben had to be a little careful when sneaking up to pat his wife's bottom, otherwise he might accidentally touch Jennifer. They both had long hair and were blonde. It was difficult to tell them apart from the back at first glance. There were several jokes about this. Jack always said that one day, if he drank too much, he might accidentally take Sheila home. At one party, they both wore white t-shirts cut off just below the bra and jeans. The conversation turned to comparing them, down to their flat tummies and similar belly buttons. The guys tried to stick their fingers into their belly buttons, and the 2 women giggled and dodged. All 3 couples were as close as they could be without living together. They developed a familiarity, like when Carrie would show up in her bathrobe at 7 a.m. to pick up a couple of eggs. Such things were always the order of the day, because without fail, Carrie would come every other day or so with a new dozen. Only one morning Ben was sitting at the kitchen table, and when Carrie opened the refrigerator and leaned over, it was quite obvious that she was naked under her robe. "Carrie, your breasts are out." Sheila laughed. "Oops," she said, squeezing the material together. She then smiled from ear to ear at Ben, who blushed and walked away without much concern. At the next party, of course, Sheila told everyone about how Carrie came and showed poor Ben her charms. Everyone thought it was funny, including her husband Carl. Another night, the women bought new bikinis for a beach party they were planning, and all 3 ended up parading in them for the guys. It was late at night, and although the outfits were still in place, it was a hell of a lot of fun. Especially Jennifer, she wasn't quite ready to wear such tight panties, and she had quite a bit of hair showing on both sides. The guys offered to help her with an obviously necessary haircut, but were refused. Sheila went and brought the business card of the spa she used for her waxing treatments. There was another round of volunteers to help them both save money, followed by laughter. Parties were a regular occurrence. Friday nights were always a party. It often ended up at Ben and Sheila's house, as they had the largest yard, a swimming pool, and a always stocked bar. The only bad thing was the business travel Sheila had to do as part of her job as an outside sales associate for the software company she worked for. On these evenings, Ben was helped by the company of all their friends. Their big house seemed cold and empty without Sheila. Of course, this inevitably led to jokes about having to do without, and one day, when Sheila was on another particularly long business trip, Carl told Carrie that she should give a little help to poor Ben. This caused everyone to laugh. Of course, it was all just teasing. Another thing Ben noticed was that Carrie wore outfits that showed a lot more skin on the nights Sheila was away. It didn't bother him. Carrie was like a little doll, so small that even when she looked provocative, it was almost innocent. Sometimes Jennifer would climb into his lap and hug him to make him feel better, as she put it. Then she would jump up with a witticism about how happy he seemed to be to see her, and everyone would laugh. Of course, Ben didn't have any reaction to this, but Jennifer pretended he did. It was always a good reason to laugh at his expense. Sheila was due back the next day. Ben could hardly wait. It was a trip that lasted 5 long nights, and he hated sleeping alone. 5 long days without sex was about as far as Ben could stand without giving up and taking matters into his own hands. The sex life between Ben and Sheila was quite active. That night the party went on as scheduled, as it did almost every weekend. Ben knew the evening had taken its usual course, Carrie sleeping in their spare room, which was nothing new. She did so about half the time, even though the walk to Carl's house and hers was only about 60 meters away. Usually Carl would be there with her, but this time the two so-called bottles of vodka turned out to be Everclear. This was another fun thing about the group. They always restocked the bar without fail. The results of this mixture with orange juice appeared much faster than usual. Only Jennifer was able to stay on her feet, as she only drank one glass and switched to beer, and Ben settled on 3 of them. One full bottle of this stuff would be enough to knock out 5 people. Ben realized that. He knew that he too was on the way to a complete shutdown. Poor Jack and Carl were already in this state. "Well, I'm going to bed. You can take the bed in the living room if you want, Jen. I don't think these two are going anywhere until tomorrow." "Okay, Benny." She smiled at him. "How I wish Sheila was at home. I miss her so much. It's a pity that she has to make these stupid trips. But under the current circumstances..." "Yes, our finances are also tight, but we are staying afloat." She looked at Jack and Carl and shook her head. "I would like..." Jennifer began, but fell silent. They looked at each other for a moment, then Ben turned and walked into his bedroom. It was still early, but the alcohol took effect. Ben stripped down to his underpants and fell asleep instantly. At first he thought it was a dream, then he woke up. Someone climbed into his bed. For a moment he was alarmed, but when the hand slid down his chest, he realized through his daze that it was Sheila, who had returned home ahead of time. He just lay there enjoying it. What a wonderful woman he had as his wife. Many times she was in the mood and was drawn to him. He reached out and touched her side. Then she slid under the covers. The room was completely dark, which only added to the sensation. In fact, it was quite fast, almost always the first time after Sheila returned home. Then later they would go for a much longer and more intense session. Ben felt the bed shift as Sheila stood up and headed to the bathroom to clean herself. He heard her bang the door, then again as she fumbled for the door handle. "Thank God you're back," he muttered, receiving no answer. That was the last thing he remembered saying before sleep enveloped him again. He then woke up briefly as Sheila climbed back into bed and snuggled up to him. The sunlight hurt Ben's eyes as he woke up. It took a few seconds to clear his head. His mouth felt like cotton wool. His lips stuck to his teeth. He reached out to Sheila, but she was not there. Having difficulty coping with the headache, Ben stood up. Then he went to the bathroom and drank some water. He found his clothes and got dressed. In the living room, Jack was still fast asleep, and Carl was nowhere to be seen. He noticed that Jack was now sitting in the chair and wondered for a moment how this had happened. Ben walked down the hallway and opened the door slightly. Carrie and Carl curled up on the bed. Carl was fully dressed, but Carrie was naked, pressed tightly against him, her hand resting on his chest. All he could see was the curve of her side and her bare thigh over Carl's large body, but that was enough for him to know that Carrie was naked. He quickly closed the door with a laugh. It was obvious they had a good time last night. There was no one in the kitchen. He then checked the other bedroom. The bed was made and everything looked untouched. Jennifer must have gone home. It was only a short distance away. Ben made coffee, sat down and sipped it slowly. He wondered where Sheila might have gone. Maybe to Jennifer and Jack. Taking the phone, he called. The phone rang almost 10 times. Jennifer finally answered in a sleepy voice. "Hello?" "Hey, Jen. Hey, is Sheila there?" he asked. "No, I didn't see her." "Is Jack up yet?" she asked. "No, but I'll wake him up now. Carl and Carrie are still sleeping, too. Jack will probably want some coffee." Jack always went straight to the coffee pot when he woke up after drinking. "I guess. Hey, maybe we should buy regular vodka from now on. I've never seen everyone pass out so easily." She laughed. "Yeah, maybe it's better not to let Carl deal with replenishing his alcohol supply anymore. That was cruel." Ben snorted. "Are you okay?" Jennifer asked him. "Of course. Why?" Ben asked. "I'm just asking." Jennifer hung up. Ben finally woke Jack up and poured him a cup of coffee. A few minutes later, Carl and Carrie came out, both looking pretty exhausted. Carrie pulled on a white t-shirt that was large enough for her small frame. Ben realized it was one of his t-shirts with a car company logo on the front. As Ben poured the coffee, he noticed that Jack's shirt was not buttoned correctly. Then he saw that Jack's fly was open. "You are on a sortie today, as I see." Ben laughed, pointing. Jack looked down and blushed, quickly buttoning it up. He then looked at Carrie. She blushed and turned away. Everyone was unusually quiet, which seemed strange. Even Carl was quiet, which was really strange. He usually had a constant stream of wisecracks. "Has anyone seen Sheila this morning?" Ben asked. Everyone shook their heads. "I thought her plane was arriving around noon," Carl asked. "I could have sworn she came home really late last night. Maybe I was just dreaming?" If this was a dream, it was one hell of a vivid dream, he thought. After a few minutes, Ben stood up and started cleaning up. There wasn't much to do. A few bags of now-stale snacks, one empty and one half-empty bottle of Everclear, a few glasses. Carrie helped, and soon the living room looked normal again. "I think I will never drink again in my life," Carrie said at one point. But she had already said this several times after other parties. She went into the kitchen to wash the glasses. Ben went to help her. "It was you last night, wasn't it?" she whispered as soon as they were out of sight of the others. "What?" asked Ben. "You went into the bedroom, right?" She looked at Ben in surprise. "I just stopped by this morning to make sure you were okay. Sorry." He didn't want to get caught trying to see her naked, but he didn't see anything either. "No, last night?" She looked at him in bewilderment. "No, I didn't come in." He told her, feeling slightly confused. "It's okay. I won't tell Sheila." She said, then she laughed. "Carrie, I wasn't there last night." Ben told her. "Oh, God, I thought it was you. So it was Jack then." She looked into the sink and began to diligently wash the glasses. Then it dawned on Ben. "So Jack went into Carrie's bedroom? You mean Was Jack there? What did he do?" "I think you know exactly what he did. I thought it was you." Carrie's face turned red. "But I wouldn't... You mean..." Ben didn't have anything to say. "Well, I wish it was you. But now... Please don't tell Carl we were just drunk, that's all. I would let you... But Jack... Oh, God. If Jen finds out..." Her eyes sparkled a little, and she rubbed them with the back of her hand. "I won't say anything," Ben told her, somewhat shocked. Carrie said she would let him. Carrie seemed to sigh in relief, then turned and walked into the spare bedroom. Damn, Ben thought. This is not good at all. Carl and Carrie went home first, leaving Ben and Jack sitting. "I guess it's time for me to go home too," Jack said as he finished his coffee. "So what happened last night?" Ben asked him. "No idea. I don't really remember anything. Damn, this really blew my mind. I think I should go home and go to bed." Then he too left. Ben thought about it. What if Jack went into the spare room and did something to Carrie and Jennifer was there? Jen will probably be furious. If Sheila hasn't returned home yet, then who? It should have been a dream. It should have been a dream. There was no way Jennifer could just crawl into his bed naked. Flirting and teasing are one thing, but... He tried to remember, but everything was a blur. Sheila returned to bed. There was more. He tried to remember that part, but it wouldn't come. But Sheila hasn't returned yet? Ben went into his bedroom and pulled back the blanket. He stood there looking. The evidence was clear. "Hello, dear." Ben heard Sheila's voice behind him. He nearly jumped out of his skin without hearing her enter. "What are you doing?" she asked as she set down her suitcase, crossed the room, and looked at the bed. Ben began. "Oh, you poor thing. I see I'm leaving you alone for too long." She smiled at him, an amused expression on her face, and began to take off her business jacket. Ben felt a moment of confusion. "We just can't let you go off into the night on your own, honey. Come on, I'll take care of you." She grinned and began to remove his belt with one hand while undoing the buttons on her blouse with the other. Later, Ben lay thinking, He tried to convince himself that last night it was just a dream. "Wow, did you drink this?" Sheila asked, picking up the rest of the bottle later. She was poaching eggs and the smell of frying bacon filled the air. "Jack and Carl drank most of it. You know how Carrie reacts," said Ben. "Yes, one sip of this drink would be enough to defeat her." She laughed. "She drank at least 3 of these. God, she must have been a mess. Yeah, she went to the spare bedroom pretty early. Jack and Carl weren't far behind." Sheila served the food, sat down, and told him all the details of her business trip. She closed 2 deals and was still working on a 3rd. Ben listened, but his thoughts were about last night. Jennifer. It had to be Jennifer. This changed everything. Now there were secrets. He nearly jumped when there was a knock on the door. It opened and Jennifer walked in. She sat down and soon she and Sheila were engaged in normal conversation. Usually, just like dozens of times before, completely normal. Maybe it really was just a dream. Ben stood up and walked into the living room. He looked back for a moment and saw Jen looking at him. Sheila was rummaging through her purse, looking for some photos or something. Jennifer smiled at him. Then she winked. Oh my God. He decided that maybe the best thing to do would be to just pretend it was all a dream? Or maybe sit down with Sheila and have a serious conversation, confess? One way or another, Ben knew that clouds were gathering on the horizon. Half asleep in her slightly alcoholic state, Jennifer woke up to find her husband Jack no longer on the couch with Carl. She went looking and found him on top of Carrie in the spare bedroom. Carrie didn't seem to mind, even though her eyes were tightly closed. Enraged, Jennifer was nearly naked when she made it back to the hallway. Attempts to wake up Carl, who was completely drunk on the sofa, yielded only inarticulate mutterings from him, which angered her even more. Jennifer then turned and walked into Ben and Sheila's bedroom. It was completely dark. Pulling the last of her clothes over her legs, she walked over to the bed, threw back the covers, and climbed inside. She reached out and ran it down Ben's unfamiliar chest. He stirred and muttered something inaudibly. She didn't have a plan. Jennifer was just reacting when she caught Jack doing it. He promised her, swore his eternal love after that other time. They began to come to parties with their neighbors. The old drinking company had only caused problems before. Jennifer believed him, pushed the incident with the blonde waitress out of her thoughts. Everything in their lives was back to normal. Now that Sheila and Carrie were around all the time, everything was better. The husbands were nearby. Their little group was cheerful. Then, it was all over. Jennifer slipped out of bed and felt her way across the room to the bathroom. As soon as she touched the light switch, she heard Ben say he loved her, glad she came home. At that moment, she realized that Ben didn't know. She closed the door, found a towel, and dried herself off. As she walked back out, she could hear Ben. It seemed like he might be asleep, but she wasn't sure. She hesitated, then returned to the bed and climbed into it. Ben pulled her towards him as soon as she did, pulling her towards him. For a moment she expected him to react, to say something, but instead he went to sleep. After a while she got up, went and picked up her clothes, and returned home. On the way home, she was overcome with remorse. She rubbed her eyes, trying to see through the tears. It was terrible. She hated Jack for what he did, but now she had also betrayed her best friend. When she was home and lay down in her bed, she thought that she wanted to go back there, to Ben's bed. She had never experienced anything like this in her life, especially so quickly. She knew she felt guilty for doing this to Sheila, but her passion overcame this feeling. She fell asleep. Jennifer was torn between what happened to her and Ben and her friend Sheila. Sheila opened the door, called out to Ben, but received no answer. When she opened the bedroom door, she found Ben standing there, looking at the bed. "What are you doing, dear?" she asked him. He jumped and turned around, his face filled with guilt. Looking at the stains on the sheets, she realized why. He had a dream. That was proof. Poor man, left alone for such a long time. She was filled with love and took care of her man very quickly. Sheila loved these moments, without fail. When she walked through the door, he would be drawn to her within seconds. Sheila heard all about the party in her absence. Poor Jack, Carrie, and Carl were in a mess for almost the whole day, Carl even longer. Jennifer mentioned that she couldn't drink it, and while Ben obviously drank his share, he wasn't as bad as the other three. Ben sat quietly and listened to the conversation, glancing at Jennifer out of the corner of his eye. He was still unsure until one moment their eyes met, and he understood. Jennifer winked at him. However, everything quickly returned to normal, although Ben seemed unusually quieter than usual. Sheila chalked it up to shame for drinking so much, and then having this disordered sleep. She actually thought it was funny, but didn't make fun of him or mention it to any of the others. He had never done this before, as far as she remembered, but then she had also never gone away for 5 nights in a row. It was difficult to be away, but Sheila's income was almost twice as high as Ben's. Without her salary, they would not have been able to pay all the bills and the mortgage. The income made their lives easier, so she took the good with the bad. Without exception, Sheila faced harassment on these trips, mostly after she was scheduled to attend dinners. Businessmen, being away from home, and their wives, for some reason all decided that they could start courting. There were a few female salespeople too, and Sheila was well aware that sometimes, if the deal was right, they might go into a room with someone for the evening. Sheila was aware of all this, so she was careful about how much she drank and tried not to get into such situations. There was a lot of dancing. Those who knew her knew enough to keep their hands to themselves. The real problems came when potential clients showed up who didn't know her. Sheila knew that her tall, slender silhouette and long blonde hair attracted attention, although her clothing style was conservative. More than one man's hand began to make its way down as they danced, but without exception, she quickly stopped these attempts. One man, new to the meetings, went so far as to put his hand between them as they danced and placed it directly on her chest. The group at the table all heard the loud sound of her palm hitting the man's face. Everyone laughed at him, and he didn't try it again. But when he asked her to dance again later, she happily agreed. "You really are a wonderful woman, aren't you?" the man asked as he gently held her. "I love my husband." She smiled sweetly at him. She later smiled to herself when the man signed a contract with her. This was the largest contract she had ever closed. That last night in her hotel room, she was ecstatic. She could hardly wait to get home and tell Ben. When she got home, she told Ben all about the contract and how it would be her biggest quarter ever, plus the ongoing commissions. Ben listened and seemed pleased. Ben was probably uncomfortable. He was a proud man, and here his wife earned much more than him. This bonus check will be more than his salary for the entire quarter. So she did her best to quickly get past the money part and carefully kept silent about the dinner and dance with the attractive James Martin. There was no point in belittling her man any more than necessary. Ben was a hard worker and good at his job. She was completely proud of him and his skills. Carrie often thought about Ben. Of all their friends, he was by far the sweetest, and also by far the most handsome. His arms were muscular from long days on ladders and carrying heavy objects. She knew Ben was working in construction, building something, but she wasn't sure what. Being outside so much left his skin deeply tanned, and if it weren't for the fact that they were both married, she would have done everything she could to get this man into her bed. One summer, their group went on a picnic by the lake. Carrie wore one of her skimpiest bikinis, which attracted a lot of attention from the guys, while Jennifer and Sheila wore solid-colored swimsuits. Both swimsuits were white. They looked like 2 twin sisters if you didn't look closely. Carrie was a small woman, but her breasts were significantly larger than those of the other 2 women, who were much taller than her. Carrie noticed that Ben was looking at her, but not in the same way as Jack or even Carl. Jack almost stuck out his tongue, and when she noticed that he was getting sidelong glances from Jennifer, Carrie pulled on her t-shirt. Ben watched, but showed no reaction. The only time he showed any reaction was when he was around his wife. There were other people around, but Ben only had eyes for Sheila. Carrie had become a lot less careful about her body. She knew that when they had parties these weekends, often when she bent over, guys would see things that weren't worth seeing. Jack was paying the most attention, although Ben was also watching, but showed no reaction. Then one night, while they were making love, he mentioned to her that he wanted to see her have sex with another man, to see what it would be like. Carrie was shocked by this at first. and wasn't sure how to react. She had heard about such things, but she never thought that Carl would show such an interest. Carrie was no stranger to sex. She had tried many cute young men if they showed interest in her. She stopped counting a long time ago, but there were quite a lot of them. Falling in love with Carl was a surprise. There was something about him that melted her heart. She knew that he liked her to look good, so she tried to look as attractive as possible for him. The request to actually have sex with another man was quite unexpected. Most men would become angry if they slept with her and found out that she was also sleeping with someone else. But after Carl mentioned several times that he wanted her to do it, she knew that he was serious. Finally, one night when he started talking to her about it again, up until that point, she had always avoided the topic with maybes and, "We'll see." "What about Ben?" she whispered in Carl's ear. He froze for a second. Yes, he would be perfect. Carrie decided at that moment that if the opportunity presented itself, she would sleep with Ben. In fact, she was looking forward to it. Ben was one hell of an attractive man. That crazy drunken night when Carl brought Everclear, Carrie wore a string top that left very little to the imagination. A short pleated skirt that barely covered her ass completed the look. If not for the flash of color, Ben would have thought she was naked under her clothes. Sheila left town and had been gone for almost a week. Carrie knew that if ever there was an opportunity to try to seduce Ben, this could be that night. So initially, she tried to make sure Ben got a good view of her. However, she didn't calculate how quickly Everclear would sweep her off her feet, and that's exactly what happened. She quickly lost the ability to hold her head up, so she went into the hallway to the spare bedroom and instantly fell asleep. At some point, she woke up feeling someone tugging at her clothes. Thinking it was Carl, she did not resist, but something was wrong. She then thought it was Ben, but wasn't sure. Her head was spinning and she kept her eyes tightly closed, not wanting to know. Carl wanted her to do it, so she just let it happen. There was some movement for a short time, then she felt a rush of wetness. The weight was lifted from her, but she could not remain conscious. When she woke up, Carl was nearby, snoring loudly. Carrie knew she was naked, her hand resting on her husband. She had no idea how he got there. Then she simply closed her eyes and went back to sleep. Maybe it really was Ben, were her last thoughts before she drifted off to sleep again. Sheila sat and looked at Ben as he told her that something had happened and he just wasn't sure what. He told her that someone had gotten into his bed and he thought it was her who had come home early. Her eyes widened when he said he now thought it was Jennifer. "Damn you!" were the first words from her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. "Honey, I was drunk. I thought it was you. I thought you came home earlier." He tried to explain to her again. "I'm guessing you slept with Carrie too, huh? Entertained my girlfriends? Do you think you'd like it if I went and entertained all your friends?" Ben retreated as she advanced. He had never seen such anger on her face. "No, I didn't do it. Honey, I'm sorry." He tried again. "You are truly pathetic. You are pathetic beyond belief. I gave you everything." Then she suddenly stopped crying and her expression changed. Furious, she ordered him to leave the house. She was so angry, so madly furious, that he retreated, and then his clothes and some things flew out of the door after him. Ben spent the night in his truck, then moved into a dingy hotel. He was absolutely miserable. After at least 2 days, he realized that he had not eaten anything at all. He went to a local diner, bought a hamburger, and devoured it. He snatched it away as soon as he returned to his room. A week later, he found a small studio. It was terrible. Even the floor was uneven. Every attempt to talk to his wife was rejected. All his calls went to voicemail, and he kept sending messages telling her he loved her. Then his phone rang. He was in the bathroom and almost broke his leg rushing towards it. "Ben, if you don't come to work, I swear I will fire you. I don't care if your dog died, you come here," his boss shouted into the phone, then hung up. Ben sighed, got dressed, and went to work. That evening, he drove past his house, and it was dark. Sheila's car has disappeared. He called her work number and heard a message that he had heard before. "I'll be on a business trip until the 23rd, Please leave your name and number, and I'll call you back. If it's a product question, please call." Ben hung up. Then he dialed the number again, just to hear her voice. He looked at his watch. It was the 15th. 7 days. She had 7 more days left on her business trip. Ben went into his room and called Sheila's cell phone. It went to voicemail again. He was looking for something to eat when someone knocked on the door. There was a man standing there who handed Ben a package. "Served to you? Sorry, lad." The man turned and left. Ben sat down and read the papers. He was absolutely miserable. It meant the end. It was all over. 7 days. Ben wasn't sure he could handle that much. It was the Thursday after a crazy drunk party at Ben and Sheila's when Jack realized something was wrong. It was already a lousy party because of Carl and his damn Everclear. Jack remembered what Carrie looked like. It seemed that every time he saw this woman, she looked more and more provocative. He watched, knowing he shouldn't even think about trying anything, not after Jennifer caught him with that bartender. It took Jack almost a month of begging to convince Jen to believe in his love again. He was still paying off debts on some of the jewelry he bought for her. He knew damn well that if something like this happened again, he would not only end up in a homeless shelter, but also possibly with a high-pitched voice. Jennifer was furious about the incident with the barmaid. That was putting it mildly. He didn't even dare think about returning to that bar. Part of their reconciliation was her insistence on it. "If I catch you near any of your biker friends, it's the end," she challenged him. Jack nodded humbly and agreed. Jen never really fit into his club. She only went there sometimes because of Jack. There was no point in bringing up the earlier incident with the girl everyone called Ralph. She always sat behind whoever was alone on the motorcycle. And of course, Jennifer knew that Ralph was moving from one to the other. Of course, sometimes they were all alone, but Ralph was always there. Jennifer simply didn't know about the trip when Ralph was sitting behind Jack on a motorcycle, and the guys kept their mouths shut. 5 guys and 4 girls really weren't the worst biker group on the planet, but they had fun on the weekends going to different clubs in different cities. It was always funny to see the locals quickly devastated as they roared in. In reality, they worked all week and only became bad guys on the weekends, and the self-proclaimed leader, named Dudley, was actually a stockbroker named Tom Harrison the rest of the time. So Jack pulled out of the game, even selling his Harley to Dudley, who simply wrote him a check. "We'll miss you, Jack," Tom said when Jack walked into his office. "My wife is more important. She just doesn't fit into this," Jack said. "Yeah, some girls just can't handle that kind of life." Tom chuckled, momentarily reverting to his Dudley persona. Jack smiled as he looked at Tom's $500 suit. He shook Tom's hand, put the check in his pocket, and left. For about 2 months after the incident with the bartender, Jack was very careful, taking Jennifer to restaurants, dancing, and trying to be as attentive as possible. Heck, he even took her to a play, which she really enjoyed. Jack pretended to like it too, although he wasn't particularly impressed by the fat woman on stage screaming what was supposed to be music. He missed his weekly trips to the local massage parlor during his lunch break. He decided it wasn't worth mentioning. He thought that everything would calm down and everything would return to normal. Then he met Ben. He knew him before. The guy and his wife, Sheila, lived right down the street. He immediately noticed Sheila. From behind, she looked exactly like his Jennifer. He and Ben chatted back and forth about his new lawnmower, and Ben invited him to dinner, saying they were going to have steaks. When Carl and Carrie showed up, the 3 couples quickly became friends. For the next few months, every weekend was a party somewhere. Now he realized that he hadn't heard a word from them for days, and that wasn't their style. Jen didn't say a word about it, and she acted kinder than usual. Jack was curious. It wasn't like Jen to go shopping with Sheila for a few days. "Have you heard anything from Ben or Sheila?" Jack asked Jennifer. "No, dear. Maybe she's on another business trip?" Jen said after a moment of hesitation. Then she headed to the kitchen. Something was wrong, Jack was sure of it. Jennifer's reaction was not entirely correct. He called their house. The phone just rang. It wasn't that unusual. Sheila was always somewhere. She had some crappy sales job that kept her away almost as often as she was home. He then called Ben's cell phone. Ben immediately picked up the phone. It sounded different, but Jack couldn't figure out what was wrong. Did he sound interested at first? Then his voice changed, as if he didn't want to talk. When Jack asked about plans for the weekend, Ben refused, saying that he had nothing to do with it. He then hung up before Jack could ask what the hell was going on. That evening he mentioned it to Jennifer, but she also acted like she didn't want to talk about it. Jack tried to remember what happened. He remembered Carrie. She was wearing a thin top and a short pleated skirt. He noticed that. Carrie was so small and cute. His eyes involuntarily stopped at her. He saw her ass and tried to see if she was wearing something under a short skirt. Damn Everclear. Carrie quickly succumbed to his influence. Then Jack remembered that he was tired. But that was all except Ben mentioning Sheila coming home around noon the next day and Carl joking with him about how he hadn't worked out for almost a week. Sex. When Jennifer got up and went to check on Carrie, that was the last thing Jack remembered. By the weekend, Jack had learned from Jennifer that Ben and Sheila had broken up. It amazed him, as it was impossible to imagine. They seemed like the happiest couple in the world. He tried to talk to Ben several times, but he just didn't want to discuss anything, and acted like he didn't want to talk to Jack at all. "You make more than twice as much as your husband, and this is a community property state," the plump male lawyer told Sheila. "What does it mean?" she asked. "That means he gets half of everything, and you might have to pay him," the man said. "He cheats on me and I have to pay him?" She was surprised. "Those are the rules. At least if he resists, which he probably will," the man told her peremptorily. "Do what you have to," Sheila said as she signed the documents. She signed. She was divorcing Ben. In the elevator, she had to hold on to the handrail to avoid falling. Then the tears came. She desperately wanted everything to go back to the way it was before, but that was impossible now. Ben cheated on her, and with her best friend in the world. If it was some girl somewhere, some stranger, maybe she could handle it. But not with Jennifer, not with her. She was her best friend. At that moment, Sheila hated Jennifer. In her office, she received a message to go upstairs. Usually this meant a business trip. Sheila didn't want to go anywhere at the moment, but it was her job. Sighing, she took her briefcase and went upstairs. "We got a call about Martin's account. They want you to do a demo of the new lines," Martha's boss told her. "Can't we send some staff? This can all be easily processed," Sheila said. "They asked for you. They have 30 stores, so that's a great account. It's been in Denver since Monday. We've already arranged the tickets and booked you until Saturday." "Saturday? Is it a whole week?" "Yes, they are gathering their managers from all the stores." "Hey, we need you on this, Sheila." Martha looked at her strangely. Sheila nodded. The timing couldn't have been worse. Ben would receive the divorce papers, and although she had refused to talk to him at all for almost a month, she knew that they would have to meet to discuss everything. Her heart raced at the thought of meeting Ben. Then she pushed the thought out of her mind. That afternoon, when she opened the door to the house, it was very cold there. She got the same feeling that something was wrong as she did every day now. Ben usually arrived home about an hour before she did, and he turned up the temperature so it would be warm when she arrived. Then he met her at the door with a cup of her favorite lemon spice tea. It was the little things he did for her all the time that were part of why she loved the man so much. Sheila walked over and turned up the temperature on the thermostat, standing in front of the main vent until she felt warm air. Realizing that her eyes were wet, she dabbed them with the back of her hand, then went to prepare something for dinner. She wanted to talk to Ben, to hear his voice. She kept picking up the phone and then putting it back. "Really?" Carl asked, looking at his wife Carrie. It was only the following Monday after the party when she told him she had done it. Let someone have sex with her. She said it just like that. "I let Ben have sex with me at a party, honey," she told him, as if it had fallen from the sky. Carl has just returned from work. He stopped and stared at her. "Really?" he asked. She nodded. Carl suddenly became excited. She smiled, knowing what would happen next. "God, did you really do this? How it happened? Tell me everything." He pulled Carrie onto his lap. Carrie didn't really remember much of anything. She was completely drunk at the time. She knew deep down that it wasn't Ben, but she lied anyway. Carl told her over and over again that he wanted her to do it, that he wanted to know how it was. So when it started, when she realized it wasn't her husband, Carrie just let it happen. Carrie began to write a long story. She later added details to the story as they lay next to each other on the bed. "Next time I want to watch it," Carl said breathlessly, pressing his face to her breasts. Carrie didn't really know how she was going to do it. She wasn't sure it was really Ben. In fact, she was now pretty sure it was Jack. Finally, Carl calmed down and switched to quiet snoring. Carrie lay for a long time, looking at the ceiling. She felt trapped by her own lies. Sheila walked out of the terminal and hailed a taxi. It was cold in Denver, very cold, and she quickly got into a taxi and was grateful to be inside. The flight was terrible. Next to her sat a rather plump elderly man who persistently talked the whole way. All Sheila wanted was to get to the hotel and take a hot bath. Later, she ordered a sandwich and a Coke to her room and then went to bed. Like many hotel rooms, the light from outside illuminated the room. She tossed and turned and woke up to check the clock, then rolled over and tried to sleep. At a meeting the next day, she showed 6 people how all the different systems worked, and by mid-afternoon, they were all pretty good at it. She set up the computer and everyone took turns going through the settings and navigation. Sheila felt pretty good. Everyone showed basic skills the first time. It was easy. When she entered the room, the message light on the phone was on. Without expecting a call, she listened to the message. She immediately recognized the deep voice of James Martin. "Hi, Sheila. If you have a free minute, can you call me and tell me how your day was? I'm in room 1114. Sheila felt a slight shiver. James had been so attractive and been so nice to her last month. She was glad to finally close the deal. But she hadn't really thought about him since then, as her life had been full of sudden problems and pain. She picked up the phone and dialed his number. As soon as it rang, it occurred to her that she was in room 1120. This man was on the same floor as her, just a few doors away. "Hi, Sheila," James responded immediately. "Hello, sir. What can I tell you about today?" she said. "Please call me James, okay? I just wanted to know how your day was. Did everyone understand?" "Yes, everyone seems to have mastered the system. It was pretty easy." In fact, Sheila was already wondering why James didn't gather all 30 of his employees in one of the conference rooms. She could have done the entire presentation in one day. Their conversation was normal. James was polite, just like a month ago when they had dinner together in a work environment. He asked Sheila to join him at the next presentation. She said she didn't mind. Then later, she took a long, hot shower thinking about Ben. He should have received the papers by now, so she checked her cell phone to see if he had called. He didn't call. It was amazing. Sheila sighed and went to bed. "I don't know what's going on. It's a mess," Jack said to Carl and Carrie as he pulled out another slice of pizza that the 4 of them were sharing. The conversation was mostly about Ben and Sheila. Neither of them had seen either of them in the past few weeks. "Maybe we do know," Carl finally admitted, glancing at Carrie, who blushed slightly. Jack didn't notice the surprised look on Jennifer's face when Carl told them that it looked like Ben had walked into Carrie's bedroom that night. "Ben, it can't be," said Jack. "Yeah, he came in. Carrie and we were talking about, trying something new, and we think Sheila found out." "New what?" Jack finally said. After Carl's words, there was silence. Everyone exchanged surprised glances. "Yeah, with other people. Sex. It's not a big deal, but maybe it was a bad idea." Carl looked at the others. Jack seemed interested. Carrie blushed slightly, but Jennifer had a very strange expression on her face. Then the conversation changed the topic, but Carl noticed that Jennifer was very silent, almost as if she was brooding. She continued to glance in his direction. "I think they might be interested too, honey," Carl told Carrie after they returned home. "What do you mean?" she asked him, already fully aware of what he was talking about. Open marriage? We've never done that, maybe. So, do you think we should ask them?" "Of course, dear, if that's what you want." James Martin sat quietly during the second presentation, which went just as smoothly as the first. "Great job. I knew you were the person we needed," he told her after. She was handing out bags as she prepared to return to her room. "Would you like to join me for dinner?" he asked. She already knew that he would most likely ask and decided to refuse. I think I should," she began to say. "Well, you'll still have to eat," he winked at her charmingly. "Okay, of course," she replied. He was going to be her biggest client. She didn't want to upset him. "Great. I'll pick you up around 7. Sheila nodded. The dinner was wonderful. The place he took her to was very fancy. She waited for the conversation to turn to more personal topics, but it didn't. James was the same as before, perfectly polite. He mainly talked about sales forecasts and his plans for marketing new software products. Even later, when they were drinking wine and dancing to the accompaniment of a very good little trio in the lounge, he still gave no sign of anything more. Sheila wasn't really used to this type of behavior from men. They were usually quick to let her know they were interested. James told her about his son, who joined the military, about the loss of his wife many years ago. Sheila talked about her work and shared several funny incidents that happened to her on business trips. Later, they took the elevator to the 11th floor together, and James walked her to the door. Everything seemed innocent, just another evening out, mostly for work. "How are things going with your husband? I heard about the separation," he asked when they arrived on the 11th floor. We have some problems," Sheila replied, surprised that he even knew about it. "Maybe things will get better," he said. She didn't answer. "Thanks for the company," he said as they reached her door. "You're welcome. I really enjoyed the evening," she said, turning to him for a moment. James leaned in to kiss her. It really wasn't a surprise. She didn't resist. It was harmless, so she just let him. For a moment, it was just a brief kiss. Then his arms wrapped around her, and she felt the response. She was lost for a few seconds, then came to her senses and pulled away. James immediately released her. "Well, good night." He turned and walked down the corridor to his room. Sheila watched him for a moment, then opened the door to her room. What was it? She wondered. It occurred to her that Ben might be upset about the kiss. Then she remembered that she and Ben were no longer together. Even the thought of them being separated didn't seem right to her. Suddenly, she felt terribly bad. She needed to talk to Ben. Her cell phone was on the small table and she picked it up. There were no calls from Ben. At this moment, she wished there were. Her heart began to beat when she saw the blinking light on the phone in the room. She listened to the message. It was from her boss, Martha, who wanted to know how things were going. She picked up her cell phone and dialed Ben's number. She hung up as soon as he started calling. She sat for a few minutes, then called again. "This is Ben. Please leave your name and number after the beep." Looking at her watch, she saw that it was 12:30 at night. Where could he be? Really with some woman? She couldn't do anything else, so she went to bed. "I don't know what the hell is wrong with you, but you definitely need a vacation," Ben's boss said when he came into the office and handed in his resignation. "Family problems," Ben admitted. "Yeah, well, even if she was having an affair, it's not the end of the world. You don't have to quit. Why don't you just take a week or two off and see how things go? I'll have a job for you when you're ready." "Sheila didn't have an affair," Ben said. "Oh, well, damn. Then you, huh? Damn, I get it. Sometimes a man needs a little variety to keep him going, but that woman you have, geez." Ben didn't answer. "I'm serious, dude. Take some time, come back to work when you're ready. You're my best guy. I'd rather do it this way, okay?" "Okay," Ben said. God, what problems a weird ass can cause, thought his boss, shaking his head after Ben left. Ben was already halfway to the lake when he remembered that he had left his cell phone on the bed. He considered going back for it, then decided to hell with it. At the lake, he looked out the window of a small hut onto the pier. The small boat sat there, upside down. Looking across the surface of the water, he saw rings where fish swam up for a snack. He and Sheila spent a lot of time together at this lake. It was peaceful, the lake was full of fish. These were always good times. Now it was completely quiet. Ben knew he needed complete silence. Sheila was the weak link, but Sheila was now out of the game. If Ben confessed, and it looks like he did, this meant that Sheila knew. She was sure of this because there was not a single conversation with her, and this was unusual. Every time she tried to call Sheila, the call went to voicemail, and Sheila never called back. She even thought about going to see her, but now she was afraid of it. Damn it, she decided. The water is under the bridge. There is no turning back. It even occurred to her that maybe Sheila could do it with Jack. Then everyone would be even. But that's unlikely. Sheila probably wouldn't agree. Jennifer sighed. What a mess. Sheila nodded when James asked her to join him for dinner again. She already knew that she would agree if he asked. He was there again during her work session and approached her again after. Early in the morning, she called Ben's cell phone. The call went to voicemail. Where is he? What is he doing? He had to be at work. He always responded almost instantly. Now she was starting to worry about it. Again, the dinner was pleasant. There was also dancing. It was a different nightclub and the music was faster. Sheila was even able to forget about her problems for a while, having fun. They both drank some kind of cognac, and it was very tasty. She felt herself relax. For the first time in a long time, she felt quite good. James made her laugh as they rode the elevator together. He held her hand. She let him because it felt good. At her door, she turned to thank him again for a pleasant evening. He looked into her eyes, then leaned in to kiss her. She slid into his arms. They kissed for a long time. It made her head spin. I was hoping, perhaps you'd like to spend a little more time with me tonight? He asked her when their kiss broke. It was so polite, so nice to ask. Sheila decided then and there. She turned and inserted her key card into the lock, and the light turned green. She opened the door slightly and looked back at James. He smiled as she opened the door all the way. Did you enjoy watching Carl do this to me? She asked Jack later, after they returned home. Of course, I guess, he replied. What I really want to know is, does it turn you on when another man has sex with me? Jennifer decided to ask directly. Probably. Maybe. Jack looked a little embarrassed. I have something to confess. It wasn't Ben in the bedroom that night with Carrie. It was you. She waited for his reaction. Me? No, it wasn't. Yes, it was you. I saw you. It made me angry, so I went to the other bedroom. She told him. To the other bedroom? Yes, with Ben. I had sex with Ben, Jack. Ben! But bullshit! I don't believe it. It's true. I was going to go in and use Carl that night to get back at you, but he was unconscious. So I just got into bed with Ben and it was good. Damn good. Did you really do this? To Ben? Jack was now staring at her. Yes. And now I'm the one who broke up. It's my fault. And yours. Jennifer stood up and stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door. Jack could hear her there, seemingly crying. So what now? It was Jen's idea, not his, thought Jack. Expensive? Jack knocked on the door, but she didn't answer. He was hopelessly confused. Jennifer approached him with a proposal for an exchange. Of course, he knew that Carl had suggested it, but he could not imagine that Jennifer would agree. Jack was delighted with the idea, because Carrie was a pretty girl, and he had long wondered what it would be like. If Jennifer was determined, why not? The guys he used to run around with often swapped their women. It wasn't a big deal. Hell, he'd personally entertained their club girl Ralph on at least 3 or 4 occasions, and Tom had even suggested that his own wife might be interested in a club-wide party. Jack thought it was a great idea. Tom's wife was a very sexy brunette, but the thing with that bartender came to light before they could arrange it, and now Jennifer suddenly suggested a trade, and then everything got messed up because of it. Jack decided that he would never understand women and didn't even want to try. He got out and got into his pickup truck, heading towards the old bar. Maybe the guys will be there? At the moment, he didn't care what Jennifer thought. Damn women, each of them was crazy. Ben rowed the boat to the middle of the lake. He took a light fishing rod, tied a small shine to it, and behind it about a foot away, a hook. By placing a piece of worm on the hook, he made sure that the small piece lay straight, so as to appear as a beetle or small fish. He released it about 15 feet away and picked up the oars, but the rod tip went down before he could get them into the water. A small trout, 10 inches long, quickly swam up to the boat, and he retrieved and released the fish, removing the barbless hook. It was a fat little planted rainbow trout, easily identified by its short, frayed fins. By noon, he had caught at least a dozen of them, releasing them all. On the way back to the dock, the rod tip dropped it hard. This time there was a beautiful 18-inch-long rainbow trout next to the boat. Ben removed the hook and watched it with a smile as she swam away. Returning to the hut, he heated up a can of pork and beans and toasted some bread. As he ate, he thought about Sheila again. It was a good morning. Immersed in constant fish bites, he never thought about his problems. He decided to take a nap and then return for the evening fishing. He was sure that she would be good. Sheila immediately regretted it as soon as the door slammed behind her. She turned to James, asking if he wanted something to drink. "I'm good. Let's sit on the sofa," he told her. She came and sat down next to him. "You seem nervous, Sheila. Are you sure everything is okay?" he asked. "Yeah, it's okay. It's different. Not since I met Ben." She leaned over and rested her head on his shoulder as he wrapped his arms around her. Then she lifted her head for a kiss, again feeling that whirlwind of sensations when his lips touched hers. He began to gently kiss her neck, right in that place that was driving her crazy. Her body began to react. Sheila was used to regular sex, at least twice a week and often more often. By this point, more than a month had passed. Her body quickly filled with anticipation, the alcohol she drank earlier clouding her thoughts. She found herself stroking his slightly hairy chest with her hand. She didn't even notice that his jacket and tie had disappeared. His chest was firm. Then she shuddered slightly as his hand found her breast. After a moment, she relaxed and his hand began to explore her. Somehow she ended up in his arms. He easily carried her to the bed and gently lowered her. His hands found the buttons on her blouse and quickly opened them. She sat down to make it easier for him to remove her bra. "God, you're so beautiful," James said as her bare breasts came free. He took off his shirt and Sheila looked at him. His arms were large, strong, and his chest was well defined. It was obvious that he played a lot of sports. Smiling, James lowered his pants and they fell to the floor. He was wearing simple white briefs. She even noticed the brand. They were expensive. It all seemed like some kind of dream. She suddenly tensed, trying to move up and away from him. "No! Ben!" Sheila suddenly burst out. She suddenly pushed him in the chest. James froze. Then she felt him step back and stand up. She opened her eyes and looked at him. "I'm so sorry," she said, sitting down. "You still haven't let go of your husband, have you?" James asked her directly, standing naked and fully erect. "Yes," she admitted, looking away. A tear rolled down her cheek. "Okay, it's time for you to go home, Sheila. My private jet will take you home in the morning, okay?" "What about the rest of the meetings?" Sheila hugged her chest, suddenly feeling extremely naked. "You are a special woman. I arranged these meetings just to see you. To see, maybe... Since you separated, I thought?" He laughed and began to get dressed. Sheila suddenly felt guilty for letting things get this far. "What about..." She nodded towards James, who was still excited. It sounded crazy. Here she had just rejected him, and now she was worried about him. "I can call. They know me. They'll send someone right now. It's a pity it's not you." He laughed. "James, if you hadn't stopped, I don't think I could have, really. Why didn't you..." "I told you, you're special. But you belong to someone else, and you'll never be mine. I just couldn't." "You are one hell of a man," Sheila told him as she stood up. For a moment she forgot that she was naked. She came up and kissed him. His erection touched her bare stomach, and she pushed her hips back. Realizing, she shamefully hugged her chest with her arms again. "God, if you keep doing this, I might change my mind." He laughed. Then he turned to the door, stopped, and looked back. Maybe I should finish getting dressed first. He laughed. Sheila was still standing there completely naked, his eyes raking up and down her body. She felt very bad that things had gone so far. James shook his head and began to get dressed. So help me God, I must be crazy. Sheila, if you're with that lucky guy, for whom you're married, nothing will work out. Call me, okay? Then he went out and closed the door behind him. Jack was sitting at the table with Dudley and his wife. They were already on their way to their second 6 beers when Jennifer entered. Jack looked up and froze, waiting for her to attack him. Instead, she walked over and sat down. So, when's the next trip? She asked no one in particular. Saturday, honey. Do you want to go? Asked the cute brunette sitting with Dudley. Both men simply looked at her. Of course, love it. Who am I going with? Said Jennifer. How about you come with me? Dudley asked with a huge smile. Okay, maybe you can go with Jack? She looked at Dudley's girl with a smile. The woman shrugged. Jack doesn't have a motorcycle. Dudley laughed. Hey, Jack, want to buy it back? Sure, why not? He looked at Jennifer. Damn it, Jennifer thought. If Jack wanted it that way, then so be it. Carl sat looking out the window. It was almost 10 p.m. Carrie should have returned already. The date could not have taken more than 8 hours. She left with him a little after 14 night. He got a call at work. She told him she was going to go out with this guy she just met and have fun with him. She said it exactly like that. Carl couldn't wait for her to come home so she could tell him all about it. At 22:30, he called her mobile phone. The call went through, but no one answered. Now he started to worry. What if she ran into some bad guy? Maybe she got hurt. The next morning, Carrie still hadn't returned, and he kept calling her phone with no answer. On his way home from work the next day, still not receiving an answer, he decided that if she didn't come back, he would call the police. Carl found the note as soon as he entered the house. He couldn't believe what he wrote. It just said, I'm fed up. I wish you all the best. He went into the bedroom. All her things were gone. Not believing what was happening, Carl called her mobile phone again. Carrie! He shouted as soon as he heard that the phone was answered. This number has been disconnected and there is no new number available. Came the answer. Sheila parked her car and ran into the house. There was no one. She called Ben repeatedly, but the phone only rang. This time when she called, she heard him. Ben's phone was on the bed in the bedroom. Where in the world could he be? She noticed a pair of her blue panties lying on the pillow next to the Ben's. She picked them up. They were hers. Unsettled, she finally decided to call his boss. Yes? Was the rude answer. This is Sheila, Ben's wife. Is he there? She asked. No, he tried to quit, but I put him on vacation instead. Why? Vacation? Where? The devil knows, lady. He said something about fishing. Fishing? Lake. Sheila ran out of the house, not even bothering to close the door. She spun all 4 tires of her SUV as she pulled out. It was 75 miles to the lake. She got there in 60 minutes, not counting the turns. She blocked the car. Ben's truck was parked there. She ran up the steps and across the veranda. The door to the small 2-room hut was open. There was no one there. She looked around outside. Then, across the lake, she saw a small boat. She ran towards the water, screaming his name with all her might, waving her arms. Damn it, lady. You're scaring the fish. She turned to the old man sitting there with a float on the water. Sorry, she said, but Ben noticed her. She saw him unhook the small fish from his line and grab the oars. Then the boat turned towards the shore, Ben rowing powerfully, creating splashes around him. Is this your husband? Asked the old man. Yes. This is my husband, she answered. He seems glad to see you. The old man chuckled. He looked at Sheila strangely. She was still in her business suit. You don't look like you're going fishing, he chuckled. And I'm not going too. She laughed, starting to run along the pier when Ben swam up and jumped out of the boat. The old man watched as they hugged and kissed. Kids, he said with contempt. Then his float went underwater. Hey, I'm biting, he said to no one. He pulled out a small trout 8 inches long, and looked at the fish struggling at the end of his line. He then looked at the couple as they climbed into the boat and headed back across the lake. Well, he muttered under his breath. He took the small fish off the hook and it fell back into the lake with a splash. Looking at the boat, it was now a couple 100 yards away. She stopped, and the couple was kissing. As he watched, one oar fell and began to float away. Then they disappeared from sight. Well, he muttered again. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.